for Friday, Friday the 18th of March. Welcome to councillors, staff and to anyone who's live streaming into the meeting. Good to have you with us. Now I'd like to open the meeting with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Okay, I think we have two requests for leave of absence today from Councillor Jones and Councillor Froloff. I'll move that those be accepted. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Henson, thank you. Those in favour? Yep, all good. Carried unanimously. Thank you all. Councillor Duff, could you provide us with the recognition of traditional owners, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to acknowledge country and the land where we meet this morning, the Waka Waka land, and acknowledge the elders both past, present and emerging. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Are there any conflicts of interest, councillors, in relation to today's agenda to share? No one's got any issues with any conflict of interest matters? On today's matters. We'll move on then to 5.1, which is minutes of the previous meeting, which was held last Friday on the 11th of March. Those minutes are at page 5, and it's recommended that the minutes of the Budget Committee meeting held on the 11th of March 2022 be received. Do we have a mover for that? Councillor Duff, thank you. Councillor Henson seconded. Any speakers, questions, concerns as to the contents? If not, go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. Okay, the next item on the agenda is item 6.1, which is the draft South Bennett Regional Council Operational Plan 22-23 for Finance and Corporate, is at page 11. And as provided, and we have our General Manager. We have Manager of Corporate Services here. Manager, would you be comfortable giving us an introduction to that operational plan for the department? Thank you.
Through you, Mr Mayor. In relation to the draft operational plan for Finance and Corporate, what we've done is we've extracted the core functions from the current operational plan in relation to the corporate plan, linkages to the corporate plan, and also then identified out of the operational plan some carryover projects that would be identified for 22-23 and listed those within the new activities and projects area. The plan at this stage is reasonably conservative given that we're in early discussions around budget, and so that operational plan will likely alter in some way as we progress through the budget discussions, but in general sense it's reasonably accurate at this time.
Okay, thank you very much, Manager. Councillors, we'll get this one out on the floor. It's recommended that the committee recommends to Council that the draft South Bennett Regional Council Operational Plan 22-23 Finance and Corporate be approved for inclusion in the operational plan development process for 22-23. Do we have a mover? Councillor Potter, seconder, Councillor Shoemaker. Okay, let's go around the table. Has anyone got any questions, comments, observations at this stage? Okay, everyone's comfortable? Yep, okay, well, let's go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously, thank you all. Moving right along to 6.2, which is the draft 22-23 budget for Finance and Corporate. It can be found at page 18. So I'll open the discussion on that. And I think we'll have a discussion around this, and then we'll look to obviously get the recommendation up for consideration. So we've had a workshop on Monday, and of course that workshop resulted in the committee being presented with a draft proposed budget from Finance Corporate. We had ICT, Business Systems, Corporate and Finance, those four departments, as well as for Fleet. So these are the operational budgets for those 5 areas of council. The first area in the draft budget is the ICT and Business Systems. So we're proposing in terms of a process today, committee that we work through what we've received, and Kerry's been kind enough to put that up on the screen for us. And we've got Craig here at the controls. Thank you, Craig. And we work through that as we did last week, similarly with the budget for exec services. And I think this is obviously second year we've done this. It is a little bit of new territory for councils to have open budget meetings. So we'll just let's proceed with caution in terms of discussions as to detail in relation to staffing, in relation to allocation of vehicles to staff. Obviously, there are matters which we would leave with our executive management. If we do want to get into detail around that, I'd suggest that we go into closed meeting, which we can do under section 254J in relation to budgetary matters. And I'd be suggesting that if council wants, or committee wants a deeper discussion, a more detailed look at some of the elements of particularly wages and motor vehicles, that we should perhaps then go into closed and have that conversation in a confined environment. I think that would be prudent governance. But before we do that, let's start to look at the broad overview that we've been given. And I suppose just to put it in context, as the portfolio holder, I'd probably just like to start the process by sharing a couple of thoughts. So our 21-22 budget deficit is $3 million. Next financial year, in 22-23, council is losing a part of our FAGS grant, so we've been told probably somewhere around $499,000. We have a contractual commitment to Tech One and Microsoft licenses and subscriptions, of $410,000 extra. We are experiencing fuel price rises across the country, of course, and there's no expectation that we could reasonably expect that they'll come down over the next 18 months, and that being the case, we're probably likely, from my calculations, to have to increase the 21-22 budget by some $620,000 in light of the fact that the assumed average rate per litre going from $1.50, I think it was, Kerry, $1.40, $1.50, where we've assumed $1.60 in this year's budget, but I think last year it was even lower. So if that averages at $2, we're going to be up for an extra $620,000 on what we allocated last year. We're not sure what our EBA increase will be for our staff. That's a process that still has to be conducted through the appropriate processes involving all relevant stakeholders. But in light of that, we have to be conscious, I feel, that at the end of the day, rates are a land tax. Any increase, I feel, will add burden to our local residents already under serious financial pressure. Council's under financial pressure with all of these inflationary issues, particularly with fuel and other costs going up in the construction industry, but as are our community, with high fuel prices, which are going to cause, I think, price increases in things such as tyres, possibly in transport costs for groceries and other items. Well, no doubt our region will see increased insurances as a result of the floods. Interest rate rises are starting to happen now on home loan mortgages and are predicted to continue moving forward as a result of the inflationary pressures hitting our economy. Further to that, there's a potential that small business could see loss of trade due to lower disposable incomes being amongst local customers and tourists as a result of those inflationary pressures. In terms of a strategy, I've got a proposal to put forward as part of this discussion today, and I'd welcome other councillors to do the same so we can have that good, open discussion about where we can potentially address some of these additional costs, find savings. I'd like to suggest that we look carefully at the 3.5% and look at perhaps sharing that pain with the community, and that we look at savings across departments, particularly in areas of overheads that will not impact on the services that we provide to our community. So in light of that, I have a proposal that I've circulated to all councillors on Monday. I think we've got hard copies on Wednesday. I'm happy to work through that and share that as we go, item by item, and welcome other councillors to do the same. So in starting that process, I think, Craig, if we can get that back up on the screen, we'll kick off with the first item, which is... can we... yeah, the councillors can see the detail. Councillors got the detail in front of them in relation to the information systems budget. Yeah, does that have the information systems one, Kerry? Yep. Have everyone got the detailed information systems budget? Yeah. So we can see it on the screen there now. Thanks, Craig. Yeah, that's excellent. Okay, so if we work through that by the subheadings, revenue, rental income, we can see there that we've had a expected pretty well hold our revenue from rental income the same, from the communication tower, depreciation there, still to be finalised once we develop the capital budget. So there's just the amount provided there as per last year. If we work through then salaries for ICT, we've got that as presented there. Yeah. The only, and councillors, please, as part of the process, feel free to pop your lights on or interject if there's questions as we scroll through. Telecommunications under materials there is one. If we scroll down further, we have a budget of there of 200. We can just get that back up. Thanks, Craig. Yeah, so that's 3080 telecommunications. We have a budget there of 235,800, which is an increase from last year of 49,800 for peak services and Telstra. And we discussed this the other day. The average spend is about 17,000 a month, and I'm assuming that we'd be on contracts with these things, Anthony. By my calculations, that comes out to 205,000 for the year. But just a question: is there any reason why we couldn't that 17,000 wouldn't be the average? Are there further payments in this last quarter that we wouldn't have recognised? Because by my calculations, we could potentially bring that back from 235 to 205 and save 30,000. Keen to hear your thoughts. Thanks, Manager.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. What's been proposed in that it's actually the equation when I actually submitted that budget was inclusive of the 12 months without actually taking out the charges that go back to the individual branches that operate as business units. So that actual value that you've actually come up with there is actually fine. So that's...
Sorry, so the value that we've got there, to clarify, is the 205. You're comfortable with that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. The reduction actually won't actually impact the year's proposal because the original total submitted, the 235 there, actually had inclusive of the about $3,000 a month that's charged back to each individual branches department. So to include that as the IT as a whole is won't actually impact it because it picked up within the other extra departments as it's charged back. Oh,
thank you, Manager. So that just clarifies that extra 30,000. Thank you. So we adjust that back to 205. Thank you very much. General photocopier costs, another 4 lines down, 3568. So we've got a budget there of 60. We had a budget of 84 last year. Servicing agreements with BBC and Toner. The year to date is tracking at about 4.5K per month. Is just thinking as to whether we could reduce that down to 55, which would be the extrapolated figure rather than the 60. Or are we going to leave ourselves without sufficient budget to carry that?
With that one there, Mr. Mayor, it depends in relation to the volume and actually what activities of council. I believe that a lot of that reduction had to do with the COVID and people being actually away from the office for a duration of actual months, so the printing costs actually come down. And you can see that reflected in relation to the actual spend. So it's more dependent in relation to if all staff are actually within the council and the amount of printing is actually produced. There may be some fluctuations in that, but based on the actual how that's trending at the moment, the 55,000 seems reasonable. But I will just mention that if there is actually an increase in printing at different times throughout the year, that may actually affect that actual allocation.
Thanks. I'm happy to leave it at the 60,000 then, because as you said, we've had staff away due to COVID, so that might explain that the average per month would be down in toner costs and things. So thank you. Unless other councillors have other thoughts, but
So,
happy with that.
Mr. Mayor, just wherever we can make a saving, I think we need to, because Anthony's just said we probably put 55 is reasonable, and then if we need more, we could do it as an adjusted budget. But I think we need to, wherever we can, make the cuts, because I'm just challenged by this, where we're going to find the savings if we don't cut back as we go.
Okay, does anyone have any issues with that one? Bringing that from 60 down to 55 in light of Anthony's comments, Councillor Schumacher?
No, I don't have any issues with that one, but I was just sort of more a question in this electronic world and the investment we're putting into business systems. Like, can you actually see council going to a degree, dare I say, paperless? I love paper. But, to a degree with some of the things that we print, do you think there are things that we could put in place to actually encourage more, less printing and more online use of documents, which I know is hard because personally I struggle with that, but willing to try to change.
For sure, Council. Yes, it's just in relation to probably more a change of process or a change of habit, I suppose, in that space. If you're used to printing out something to actually review instead of actually using the electronic form, it's probably more the habit side of things. So there is definitely potential for reductions as we move further forward and use the technology to display that information. But I do, the fact of repeating myself, more the actual habits of individuals and how they actually print that and how they absorb that content is probably where the savings can actually be applied in that space. So.
Yeah, I'm just thinking from your operational plan point of view, is there an opportunity to acknowledge something in that space where we might run awareness sessions or something that, you don't know what you don't know, and we've got all this incredible software, like maybe is there something, a program or an awareness activity we could do to try to encourage that change of behaviour or encourage more awareness of the resources we have online or electronically? What are your thoughts?
Yes, most certainly. We've also, one of the activities conducted so far is to actually get electronic signatures set up. So the actual fact of actually printing out a document and actually applying an electronic, signing it and scanning it back in, saving that process in itself there actually equates to a reduction in the printing. So a few of those activities have currently been deployed or yet to be completed. So there's a few activities in that space for sure.
Thank you, Manager. Okay, so we've got that at 55. Keep moving through the materials section. Manager, IT, hardware maintenance and general repair, we'd spent for year to date, 10th of February. We've got 20 in there. Is it possible that we could reduce that to 5,000 for the year? Do we need, what are your thoughts there?
Based on the spend, I understand the 5,000 value, but we use that as more reactionary. So, for example, the weather events actually destroy any type of equipment, printers, microwave radio equipment in that space. That's where the actual fluctuations can occur, but because they're more reactive and you can't really predict what that weather event will do to that device at that time, the 5,000 is a reasonable actual suggestion, but I just do refer to the actual previous spends over the last financial years of that 5,000 figure being a little bit low, but it could be, as we mentioned there before, possibly brought at a first quarter review if there's anything unpredicted that's actually causing spikes there. So at $5,000 at the moment there, Mr. Mayor, I understand the reasoning behind it, but there may be some unforeseen reactionary things that may cause that, some adjustments where we could sort that out as that actually comes to light. So
One of those things we'll just have to see how the year rolls, won't we, and see what comes up. Yeah, thank you. IT software purchases, your thoughts there in terms of ad hoc software. Is that something that if departments, that would come centrally through you, do we need to allocate anything for that?
So the 20,000's there in the event of things that aren't predicted or required. So I think the actual reduction of that and actually bringing it back to the business units to have a defined business case and reasoning behind that and how it's actually funded and how that affects the budget moving further forward is probably a good process that'll help actually alleviate the actual reduction there. And so the 20,000 out of that too there, Mr. Mayor, I understand that. Is that to be suitable at the moment? It's just a more pushback on the departments in relation to what they're buying software for and the reasoning behind it and the actual impact of budget. The whole life costings kind of consideration comes into play a little bit more extensively there. We have processes in that place at the moment, but obviously the budget and the tight times reduction suggested will reinforce that that fact as we move further forward. And so. Yes, Mr. Mayor. Yes. Yep.
Okay, the next one was consultants. We've got 100,000 in the budget there, and we had 152,900 last year. So the 100,000 was for network management support, which is on contract, and 30,000 for document architecture design. I'd thrown a notional 80,000 in there, I suppose, just to challenge the department manager as to whether that could be trimmed in any way by utilising our existing staff. Please, if that's not possible, please tell us. Yeah.
So the 80,000 actually there it would be 100% required. That's one service that we can't do without. That helps a lot with our actual high level network management consulting with things that our cybersecurity or our storage arrays or our configuration of our network switches or things that are quite technical in nature. The actual extra 30,000 there that was submitted would actually allow for some of the progression side of things as we move with Microsoft's times of removing our actual storage requirement of being actually here on premise into cloud, and it helps us actually scope and arrange that, set up the actual project plan for that space. So, and with the reductions there, we can start to actually look at that, just adjust the timing side of things. There is a little bit of time there before we actually have to do that, but it gives us a little bit of time to actually scope that a little bit more further in-house and get a bit more detail. And then, about exactly what that'll cost and what's required externally. So it gives us a little bit of that time allocation in that space anyway, around that side of things. So I think that's fair as well too.
Okay, so again, bring that back to 80, and then you'll come back if that's not going to be sufficient, based on the timing of when that starts. Yeah, thanks very much. Okay, so we're through now. Is everyone comfortable with that, with IT, information systems at this stage? No further comments on that? Councillors, we'll move through to business systems then. I'd put forward some proposals in relation to the employee benefits section. I'm not keen to have that discussion in open forum. I think it's something we should go into a closed forum for, to be perfectly honest. I think that would be much better governance. So is anyone that would have an objection to a motion to go into closed session so we can discuss the detail now that we're starting to look at wages and fleet and those sorts of issues?
Mayor, would it be opportune with those then to hold them all to the end of that discussion, to the end of the meeting, and then just deal, rather than popping in and out, just go through all your materials, type budgets first, and then we can have a broader discussion on that topic in closed.
Council happy with that if we go through everything else and come back and look at wages and fleet at the end? Yeah, thanks, Mr. CEO. So if we just keep progressing through, then we come down to service, come down then to materials. We've got nothing in there, I don't think, Manager, because we've got those licenses there, haven't we? We're committed to that. That's part of our licensing agreement, which we've signed up for. That's a contractual arrangement.
Yes, that's correct.
Yep. And then we've got consultants. The consulting is $150,000. Of course, that's a reduction from last year's budget due to some of the changes that have happened in the organisation there. Councillor Schumacher?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one question. Just in relation to those licenses that we've signed up for, is there like a process where we annually review that, like make sure that we're getting value out of that contract and it's delivering on the needs that we actually anticipated it would?
So that ties into our 3-year actual contract term, and at the end of the 3-year, which is the end of this financial year, discussions come in place to renegotiate that value, and also we analyse the actual licences that have been bought through that, and whether they're actually still getting the value for money for it, and there's opportunities for that discussion, negotiation in that process.
Yeah, thank you. Good insight. Thank you.
The 150,000 had put there that could we reduce the scope of the plant and fleet down to save us 50,000 from 80 to 30, and perhaps extend that out over a longer period. Just a proposal to get council's thoughts. Might get you just to give us your views on that, Manager.
So in relation to the values of there, so we've got a few projects kicking around at the moment in relation to plant and fuse, centralised procurement and items along those lines that are due to actual capacity and within the actual business systems team, and some of the recent resignations have caused some pauses and delays. So with what's actually proposed there and how far those project plans are actually progressed at the moment, reducing that to that point won't be too much of an impact, because we haven't completed the actual projects tied up with that actual funding at the moment. So to reduce that down to that value at the moment, depending on resource capacity, to have that actual value there and not actually spend it, it's probably worse than actually coming back and asking council that we have now capacity to do that. We need more funds in that place to consider at that point. So that's how things are travelling through the year, and capacity and resource wise, I think that's reasonable currently as it stands as well too. So,
Thank you. Councillor's thoughts on that?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I think that's a really great process anyhow. If we're it's in the spirit of zero-based budgeting. So if we go through and spend the funds that we've got to the degree that we can with the resourcing that we've got, then I'd welcome a conversation, like a discussion where we look at where we've been and where we're going and what's it going to take to get us there. So rather than kind of leaving that amount of money in there, I'm of agreement. So I think that's a great process, Anthony, and look forward to sort of those kinds of conversations throughout the year.
Thanks, Anthony. So the figure there, Anthony, for Craig would be, you're saying the 150 or the 100, sorry?
the 150 there, Mr. Mayor.
Leave the 150
Sorry,
there, and
yes.
then we'll, again, progress that as time goes on.
Sorry,
Bring that back to council.
to you, Ms. Mayor, I
Yes.
thought, you said that you were going to, the 100 would be okay, and that we could look at it as we go. Is that's what I was.
So the proposal is 150, and the savings would take 50 out of that. The 150,000 there would allow for any consulting side of things, but the main issue is that we haven't been able to spend the actual first allocation that was in it because of the resources and capacity of the organisation to absorb that. So the 100,000 there would still help us complete things that aren't finalised at this point. But if being cost conscientious, if we needed that extra 50,000, I'd be happy to come back to council and actually ask about reconsidering that, depending as we resource and as the year plays out, what we can actually complete, what we need to actually do that. So the 100,000 at this current point would be happy enough to go through, and then I'll come back with more information to reconsider that if council would be happy to do so.
Thanks, Anthony. I think council's very open to having those conversations with all the managers about, as time rolls on, if your budget changes, come back with, more information. We have those quarterly budget revisions, so I think we're very open to that. We see this as a fluid process rather than one where we lock ourselves in on the 8th of July and there's no movement. So please understand that, that opportunity is always there for all managers to come back. Council's very open-minded and flexible around considering things as events change throughout the course of the year. Yeah, so thank you. Is there anything else there, councillors, that you wanted to raise on business systems before we go into corporate? Oh, sorry, General Manager May, sorry.
Sorry, through you, Mr Mayor, I just had a question, Francis, just regarding that plant and fleet review. So would the reduction mean that that plant and fleet review project that's ongoing now would that be on hold, or would that have to be just reassessed and brought back to council?
So there's already some commitments actually been made in that space, and also, so all to do is it'd give us the time to complete the things that have been already committed, and then actually understand the things that aren't actually done or need actual additional funding to come back with a bit more information to actually apply for the funding in that sense. So there's still a lot of activities yet to complete. So it's like in relation to our asset accumulation and some configuration and development side of things. Until we get that actual those phases of the project completed, the actual understanding of if there's any variances or any additional funding required for any additional configuration or consulting in that side of things can come back as part of that discussion. And so
We'd welcome a report back on that, Anthony, when you're in a position to do so. Thank you. Yeah, thanks, General Manager May. Okay, business systems. Shall we move on to corporate? Yep, customer contact. So we've got nothing there in employee benefits, so we'll move through to Kingaroy customer service. As seen on screen, and then Ango customer service, they're really just electricity charges, Manager, aren't they? Yeah. Are you comfortable, Manager, with those figures that we've got at this stage?
Correct, through you, Mr Mayor. The charges in those initial components of those budgets until we get to 1159, which is where the main budget for corporate services now sits, and the other items are relating to communities for that property branch.
Yeah. Thank you. Rolling through Blackbutt Customer Service Centre there again, we've just got the electricity, as we had for the previous ones, including Mergen. We go through to corporate services revenue, nothing remarkable there. Pretty well setting that similar to last year. Agency income from Centrelink and QGAP, that's best estimate at this stage, Manager, in terms of budget.
Correct, through you, Mr Mayor. Those contracts will be initiated likely in the next 2 to 3 months, and at that point we'll have a clearer indication.
Thank you. Okay, expenses there. We come down to employee benefits, which we'll defer to closed, and roll across to materials. Thanks, Craig. We've got 2,500 there for consumables. Go down licences and permits, 1,900. Internal audit, 75,000. 25,000 for investigations and 155,000 for legal advice. Just put up for discussion whether we could potentially reduce that investigations budget. Just again looking at, I mean, I know we're doing zero budgeting, but you just don't know. I mean, there's some things you can't predict. I mean, if one was to assume that this current year to date was any indicator, I mean, you never know, but would it be possible to reduce that from 25 down to 12 based on what we've done this year and save 13? And it's a very open question, Manager, you know, certainly, yeah, welcome your thoughts.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you. In relation to that budget, just a little bit of clarity in relation to the notes on the side. The 25,000 proposal is 20,000 for investigations in relation to the OIA and those potential matters, and then the 5,000 is actually in relation to administrative action complaints and other complaints that the organisation at times addresses. I believe the reduction with the intent of this meeting and how we're trying to identify potential savings with some of the unknown parameters that we might face through the next financial year, and I appreciate the considerations that my fellow colleagues are making. I believe that we could do that, and then I can bring back any variances to the council to consider.
It really could go anywhere, couldn't? I mean, one doesn't know. It could be zero, or it could be 30 or 40,000. Who knows? Thank you, Mr. CEO.
Mr. Mayor, the only one I would, and certainly thank the manager for her comments. So I would have said 15. The only one I would keep absolutely is the 5 for the administrative action complaints, because with the volume of those that are coming through and the processing that takes, that 5. So if you left it at 13, well then 8 would be OIA. So whether you wanted around 8 and 13, but clear in whatever that number is, it's that 5 really needs to be kept for the admin action complaints, because they're the one constant that given some of the ones that we've got on at the moment, the council would be aware of as well. They're going to continue over this next 12 months.
Correct. Mhm. Mhm. Again, through you, Mr. Mayor, in relation to legal advice, we, as an organisation, it does try and mitigate some of our risk. So there's a process where the organisation, if they wish to seek legal advice, must contact corporate services to explain to corporate services what their intention is in terms of the information or the advice that they seek. Then we issue a PE number, raise an order, and then subsequently pay for that legal advice, and then track that legal advice through our register. So we hold that for the organisation to access should they wish to do so before seeking further advice. The challenge, I believe the organisation is reasonably conservative in their initiation of seeking legal advice. They only do that on the basis that they reasonably believe there is a significant risk to council, and that without seeking that advice could cause greater financial impact should the matters go awry. So I believe that the organisation is reasonably in tune with not just going out to seek legal advice for the sake of it, because we put those processes in. I'm reasonably comfortable with that. And also my other reservation is that I don't believe all of our legal advice is hitting that line at this point in time. We run reports periodically. We're in the process of running that report now, and we have identified a number of legal advice items that have been sourced out. And what happens is it's not that anybody's doing anything untoward, it's that they're putting it to a particular project that's in relation to that legal advice. So it's a natural association, but the organisation has made a decision to collectively fund legal advice. So that's where it's just tidying that process up. Again, in terms of dropping a pen, it's difficult to understand what the year might present. I'm able to work within the budget that council decides and respect that decision, and then bring back any further challenges that might come as a result.
Thank you, Manager. Before I go to the other councillors, is there anything extraordinary that's happened so far this year? Any particular big, chunky ones that might not happen next year that we need to be aware of? I mean, can I say, don't give us the detail. Just it's a yes or no question. Yes. It's simply a yes or no question.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. In terms
it's no,
of
just
the trend in accessing legal advice, it's fairly standard. It's a normal year for us in terms of the challenges that we might face.
Question answered. Thanks very much. It's a normal year. Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Manager. Councillors, what are your thoughts? Do you want to leave that at the 155 and see how we travel? Do you want to reduce it, and then Manager can bring us back quarterly reports as to how we're travelling?
I'd like to see the 100 in the spirit of the way we're operating, and anything extra is brought back to council. Thank you.
Okay, everyone comfortable with that? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm fully supportive of that approach, and but do want to make sure that doesn't mean if we actually really need legal advice that we don't go and source it. So yeah, there is I think an understanding there amongst council that that's still the expectation. But yeah, really, better suck it and see.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, microphone. Yeah, thanks, Mr. Sear. Keep forgetting to put the mic on. What are your thoughts, Manager, on that? Yeah, where are we likely to land this year on that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, similar to what the photocopying impact has been due to COVID and the offices being vacated, and also some of the limitations in our ability to have community gatherings, encourage the community to take on particular activities. So our correspondence in that mailing, postage, stationery, etc., both the postage and stationery, has been impacted by the way we've undertaken some of our activities, or not in that case this financial year. In relation to postage, Australia Post often contact Council in the next couple of months to advise us of an impending percentage increase. That hasn't happened as yet. I've been actively awaiting that notification and hopeful that we don't receive it, but that does tend to impact on our budget. Again, with the spirit of the nature of the discussions today, we certainly can take steps to reduce the budget and then, I guess, address that further down in the financial years, depending on what the nature of the activities, the organisation, and how we progress in that space.
Thoughts, councillors? Councillor Potter?
Look, I personally believe that if Manager Knudsen is willing to do that, then I think that's great, and I think we should just take it.
Thanks, Councillor Potter. Everyone comfortable with that? We'll go with the 80,000 at this stage. And again, Manager, come back to us if if we're looking at that's going to be a problem. Yeah, thank you. General Stationery Manager, we had 18 in the budget. Conversation started. Could we get that back to 15? Is that realistic? Thoughts? Thank you.
It will be reflective of the organisation's activities, again, in terms of photocopying, printing, stationery. And I guess just in terms of context, we have 10 trainees commencing. We have new staff, as in our school-based trainees, so not necessarily new positions, but a body of people that will occupy space and therefore require some level of support, whether that's paper, pens, or etc. We certainly take a very strict approach to stationery, where our stationery is under lock and key, and there's a process to access the stationery, and there's a bit of a scrutiny around that at times. So I do believe that we are reasonably conservative in our use, and talking to other colleagues in relation to how they manage their stationery in other local governments. I believe we're certainly conscious of the fact that Council's conservative approach to the budget and at the community in which we live. So I don't believe any seepage is happening to the degree where there would be a concern in that space. So I do believe it's legitimate use for work purposes. So we could reduce it again to the 15. That certainly sends the message to the organisation that a more conservative approach is needed. And I know that some staff buy their own stationery because they either choose to have that particular type of stationery, or they choose to do so for other reasons. And not that we would ask them to do that, but there's a lot of people working with us in that space, put it that way.
That's excellent to hear. Thanks very much, Manager. Sounds as though you're running a fairly tight ship with the stationery cupboard, so thank you. Councillor Potter?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I know it just seems like a small amount, $3,000, but $3,000. But cutting the stationery back, I know there are staff that I've spoken to that have said that they can't afford to buy stationery. They're bringing their own in from home, and I think this is just. I think something like this, we've got to be really, really careful that we can still let them do their job and not have to be out of pocket.
Councillor Potter, other thoughts? We won't spend too much time on this one. Do we send a message to the organisation that we appreciate everything you're doing? Can we target the 15 again, and let's see how we're tracking mid-year? Comfortable with that? Yeah, thanks, Manager. But please pass on that we're very grateful for the fact that the staff we certainly don't expect them to bring their own stationery, but we're very grateful that you're running it tight. Yeah, you're keeping that nice and tight and very well controlled. So Thank you. Catering for staff amenities, we've got 5 in there. We've spent 1,000 year to date. We have had a lot of people away with COVID, haven't we, as you've pointed out to us before. So, let's get a realistic figure there. What are your thoughts there, Manager? I know it's a hard one again.
It is a hard one in relation to just the tea room. Those tea room supplies are also accommodate for if there's community meetings held at this office, for example. So, as because of COVID and the reduction of and the closure of the office to public meetings, and then additional people in the gallery, all of those little items mount up. And if I did some quick sums, and Kingaroy office might use approximately $2,000 to $2,500 worth of milk a year, and that's not because of any other reason other than it's just general supplies, and it's not particularly just the staff room. It is for the community that comes to meet with staff, and that cup of tea or coffee as a welcome.
I don't think it hurts
Gesture.
to have some nice morning tea for people occasionally to thank them for the effort they're putting in. Can I just make everyone aware that's watching that councillors only have normally dry packet biscuits for morning tea. So please don't think that we're sitting in here eating croissants or Danish pastries. We have dry packet biscuits from the local supermarket for morning tea. So that's the extent to which we're cutting the budget. But Carolyn, should we just leave that at the 5,000 and again see how it travels? So on that one, because the milk bill itself is $2,000. I mean, we've got a fairly large staff that we've got to provide for. So is everyone happy with that? Yeah, happy with that.
And
yeah,
thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for clarification again for the community, it is tea, coffee, sugar, milk, and we do buy from local suppliers. So for that small amount at this stage, I appreciate every dollar counts. But yes, I appreciate the consideration of council. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Manager. And as I said, we do have a lot of staff, and we only provide the absolute bare basics that we buy locally. So please be assured that there is no luxuries being provided inside council to the councillors or the staff, that's for sure. Okay, so thank you very much, Manager. I think we're moving on to finance now. Manager Finance, Kerry. We'll scroll through there to Kerry's area. Thanks, Craig. Nothing there in to start with. Okay, so we've got admin recuperates, Kerry, leaving that same as last year. We've still got to see where that lands, don't we, in terms of the rest of the budget. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. Once we've done the drafts for all the different areas, we can then run those admin recruitments through the model and bring them back to the council.
Thank you. Council, we've got a notional allocation in there, 500,000 for a dividend. Any thoughts or discussion on that? Happy to leave that notional figure, or do you want to see that changed at this stage? Councillor Shoemaker?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I think we put a question mark and a circle around that one and come back to it at a later date after we've done more work on the budget, because I think that will really depend on the whole picture. And once we've worked through each individual area, I'd probably like to review that one at that point.
Thanks, Councillor. Can we pop a little flag next to that one, so we can come back when we wrap everything up at the end and have another look at it? Thank you. Certificates for rates. Now, Kerry, again, certificates for rates, State Fire Commission. Can you talk us through your thoughts there and those figures, 200,000 and 66,000? Thank you.
Yeah, sure, Mr. Mayor. So the State Fire Commission, that's a pretty stagnant figure year on year. So we've left that similar to what this year's was going to land at. With regards to the certificates, so the rate searches, while the last few years we have seen large increases due to the, big boom that we've been having, while we do envisage that it may go into this next year, we have made sure that we haven't gone too overboard with what we believe that revenue will be, because at some point that boom is going to have to sort of level out and even decrease compared to what we've got now. So we have increased slightly since last year, but we haven't gone to the levels that we have seen in the last few years.
Thoughts, councillors? Kerry's taken a conservative assumption there that we won't see the same level of rate searches. Comfortable with that assumption? Yeah, leave it at the 200. Okay. Moving through, Kerry, interest on rates, that's pretty well a set figure based on the interest rate and the amount of money we've got invested, or we'll have invested, yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. So again, based on the fact that our interest rates are quite low at the moment, we do envisage they will go up a little bit potentially in this next, financial year. But again, try to keep that conservative approach until we know what's going to happen, especially based on flooding and CPI. It's just where that will actually land. Just not quite sure at this point in time.
Just for the community, I think council had, don't quote me, but approximately $40 million in the bank at the end of last financial report. Last month, $420,000 is the targeted interest that we'd receive as presented here. So we're just taking that as the expected figure based on what we know the interest rates to be at this point in time. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Rates, levies and charges. I think we might, is council happy if we leave? Do you want to leave that one to the end? I think we're going to work through a fair bit of other stuff first. Are you happy to leave that to the end and come back to it as the last item? Moving through to grants there, at the bottom of page 401, 6.621 million. Can you give us an overview of what that comprises? Thank you.
Yes, sure, Ms. Mayor. So that one there, that reduction there is from the federal assistance grant, where we're expecting that it will land for this next year, knowing that we do have that decrease. So for this next 12 months, we presumed that we would roughly get about 500,000 less overall compared to what we actually received this next year. So as you can see there, what we've got as a variance is only 400,000, but that takes into consideration our original budget for last year. What we actually received compared to that was an extra about 98,000. So that's why there's a little bit of a discrepancy there.
Kerry, just in summary, we're losing 498,000 in the federal assistance grants from the Queensland Grants Commission, based on the decision they've made to cut us by 7%. But there's a $98,000 adjustment, a timing issue, which would mean the net loss would be about 400,000.
Yes, that's correct.
That's correct. Yeah, thank you. Any comments there, councillors? Clear with that? Okay, we'll keep moving over to depreciation. Very same as last year at this stage, depending on what comes forward into the future on those right of use assets.
Yes, that's correct.
Donations, rating relief, we've got $192,000 in expense there. Just for the community, that's where council provides relief to not-for-profit community groups.
Yes, that's where that lands, yes.
Thank you. Any, Councillor Shoemaker?
Just in terms of depreciation, I just can't remember the schedule because there's a lot on there, but we are having a separate session on depreciation, aren't we?
Yeah, we will bring all the depreciation back to council at a later date once we've bedded down a little bit as to what we predict next year's capital budget will be, as well as what we know. We're in talks at the moment as to desktop revaluations, so we're trying to incorporate, where that may land as well in the whole scenario.
Yeah, thank you.
Craig, if we could just keep scrolling through them.
I just want to, on that.
Sorry, Councillor Duff, I just can't see your light.
Oh,
It's
sorry.
behind the screen. My apologies, yeah.
Just on the rating relief, our year-to-date actual was 193,547, and now we're budgeting for 104. Just wondering if I could have an explanation around that one.
Yeah, sure, Councillor Duff. What happens is all of the donations that rating relief hits in finance, and then what we do is there's a portion that then relates to water, wastewater and waste that needs to be journaled across into their area. So that journal just hasn't happened yet.
Sorry, I remember you saying that. Sorry. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Manager Kerry. So just for the community again, year to date, to the end of February, Council has donated back $237,182 in rates and charges, rebates, relief, donations, we call them in the accounting books, to not-for-profit groups across the South Burnett as a goodwill to help those groups by providing those that relief, Kerry. Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move past employee benefits down to materials if we could. Thanks, Craig. So we've got materials there, councillors. I might just let councillors have a look through that blue section, materials, and raise any issues there. Just moving through to plant, we've got $1,000 in plant. Can I just note, actually, sorry, before we go there, materials budget last year for finance was 1.8 million, this year 1.73 million. So we've seen a $72,000 reduction there. Kerry, anything to explain there? That's savings.
Yeah, so most of those, I guess, savings are more a movement of those council rates that council pays on their own land that we do, and that's not exactly a saving. It's more of the fact that last year we budgeted that all of those utilities were to go into finance, where this year we're putting the portion that relates to water, wastewater and waste across into their business units. So it's just a bit of a movement there.
Thank you. Councillors, Councillor Shoemaker.
Just wanted to confirm those valuation fees, is that to value our assets, or is that what it costs us to get all of the properties in the South Burnett valued?
Yeah, that's from the land valuations for the rates, yes.
Yep, so that's what we have to pay the government to give us the data each year around what each property is valued at. Yep.
Yes,
Got
that's
that right.
correct.
Yep,
Yep.
thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Thanks, Manager Kerry. So just for the community, there's 152,000 there in the budget that Council pays to the Queensland Government to provide us with the valuation figures so that we can do the rating calculations, and that's a fee that we sorry, no, it's 186, isn't it? Sorry, I got the wrong figure. It's $186,000, which is something we have to pay every year, of course. Okay, and we've held insurance at the same level as last year, Manager. 731,000 to insure council's assets. I guess we won't know where that's going to land, will we, for some time?
No, not for a little while yet. It'll be close to the end of June, early July, when we get those bills come through to know exactly what it's going to cost us.
Yeah, thank you. I guess we'll probably need to leave a flag on that one over the next 12 months, won't we, in terms of what's happening with insurance premiums, with the price of everything going up and with flooding events and other things. So, okay, if we move into sorry, Councillor Shoemaker.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, just with those insurances, so have we only the 569,024? Is that the whole year what we've paid in insurance, or
No. So
No.
because when we get our bills, they're generally, so we may get them in June, but they're actually for this next year. So they do go into that balance sheet as part of a prepayment and then are brought across as a monthly amount. So there will be another 4 months worth of insurance premiums to come and hit there.
Thank you.
Moving on to...
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
sorry, Councillor Duff. Yes,
Just
thank
with
you.
the valuations, that's not every year. That's every
We do have to pay those fees every year, yes.
So, Councillor Duff, that's to access the data. That's for them to provide us
Sorry.
with the valuation data, I think, isn't it, Mr. CEO? Is that correct? Yep.
Thanks, Mayor. It's almost like a precept, for want of a better term. But yeah, it's we pay several departments, natural resources. I think we have a precept, valuation fees. Would love to get out of it, Councillor, but unfortunately the government likes their chop too.
Thank you.
We've got $1,000 there for internal plant charges. That's an allocation. Kerry finance staff need to travel between offices or go to a professional development or something, I'd imagine. Is that what
Yeah.
that's for?
Yeah, that's correct.
The next one, consultants, 30,000. Last year the budget was the same, 30,000. We've spent a little bit more this year. I'd put there 15 as a starter point to see whether we could wind back the scope of that. Again, for the community, council leaves no stone unturned in terms of looking at all our consultants that we bring in externally to support what we do. What are your thoughts there, Manager, and other managers? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Look, again, like the other consultants that we've been talking about, if you did want to reduce it to 15, that's fine. And if we did have, as the year went through, that we needed to engage, for that rates modelling or anything regarding that we could always bring that back to council for, as a budget revision, if we did need to do anything in that space.
What are your thoughts, councillors, in terms of work around valuations and rates over the next 12 months? Councillor Shoemaker?
Yeah, I think in the spirit of zero-based budgeting, I support that kind of approach where it's not that we're, not open to it. I think the value that we've gotten from John Perry during the last valuation, during the last budget, and the rates was, evident, but it would be good to probably try to save some money, and if we need to, or there are opportunities to engage to bring them back. I think that's a good process.
Thanks, everybody. We'll move through. So, Craig, we'll got that one. Thank you. Move through to discounts allowed and pensioner discounts. Kerry, could you obviously discounts allowed, that first line, discount allowed for general rate, that's the 10% discount that council continues to offer
Yes, that's that.
for the community. So I'd probably just ask councillors' thoughts on continuing to provide that 10% discount, whether that's something you want to do into the next year. And just acknowledging here, that figure swings off whatever we set the rates at, doesn't it? So
Yes, correct. It'll adjust.
It'll adjust
depending on where
accordingly.
that lands. Yep.
Thank you. And the pensioner one, it's a set figure, isn't it, based on the number of pensioners that we have? Is that correct?
Yeah, so we've sort of had a bit of a look as to, what the current pensioner remissions are at the moment, and just sort of kept it roughly where we believe that it should or might land.
Thank you. Councillors, any thoughts or questions on that? Councillor Duff?
I'm keen to support the continuation of the 10% discount. I know other councils have used that to drop it back to 5% to try and get more revenue in, but I just think it's a money grab. It's a way, and it's not the way to go as far as supporting our ratepayers. I think the 10% discount is a good incentive for them to continue to pay early, and so I'm keen to not go down that path of trying to make cuts through just saying, oh, well, let's do a 5% discount as opposed to a 10%, but because I know other councils are doing that, but I'm not in support of it.
Other councillors, any further thoughts? Councillor Shoemaker?
I don't disagree. I think the 10% is certainly, it always encourages me to pay my rates on time. But the way, I know there are other councils that have done it, and the way they explained that to me was that, well, your rates are essentially levied at 10% more. So they can take that 10% off. And I'm just thinking about own source revenue and our current level of rates, and that one I wouldn't mind just putting a flag around when we do the rates budget and actually really just reviewing it. I don't disagree. I think the 10% is great, but I'm not supportive of continuing to increase our rates and then give a 10% discount either. So I probably just want to have a look at it from a bigger picture point of view. If we keep adding every year to our rates, depending on CPI or whatever, and then we take 10% off, it does seem a little bit counterproductive. I know it's more of a incentive to pay on time, but yeah, I probably wouldn't mind just when we look at that bigger picture for rates and charges, just having a look at that again, just to consider it. I'm not by any means suggesting at this point we change it, but just would like to understand if we did alter that, what that would look like, rather than increasing our rates revenue through other ways. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'd like to flag that one for later.
Major Kerry, can we put a flag against that one as well? Thanks. So we can,
Yeah.
council can continue to have that conversation around, what the intent of the discount is, what are the implications of that, what are the arguments both sides of it. We can explore that one further in accordance with Councillor Shoemaker's thoughts. And just for the community, so far this year, to the end of February, council had provided a 10% discount on rates where paid by the due date to $2 million, and by the end of March, that's probably going to go out to about $2.8 million in discounts that council's provided to the community through that 10%. So that just quantifies that, $2.8 million in community discounts. We're just about done for finance. Anything further there before we move on to procurement? No? Okay, so we'll keep going. I thought we might get through procurement and then we might break for morning tea. So just procurement's our stores, of course, for the community. That's our purchasing department. We'll move past employee benefits down to materials. Any thoughts, Councillor Shoemaker?
I just had a question with regards to the waste disposal for depots. Just is that the right place for it, or do we have like waste charges across the operation elsewhere? Is it a double up, or is it actually just specific waste needs for a specific contract?
Yeah, no, good question. So what happens is basically, so we have a few different areas that have, your skip bins or waste that needs to be picked up as part of the contract. And so because waste generally will take, I guess that's where that contract is for the contractor who picks up all the bins. What we tend to do, like we do with, I guess, charging waste for, their phones and those sorts of things, is that we recognise that because the waste department is currently paying for all that, but it's almost like an internal charge back to the stores department and some of those other ones, to acknowledge that, that's their cost and not waste's.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Well, yeah, let's just have a look through that blue column there, the proposed 22-23. I will note for the community again, last year's budget for the materials area of our waste, which is our dumps, $34,000 for our team there to operate, and that includes. So this is. All right, you've got me through to. Yep. Sorry, that includes all of those materials type expenses and so forth, but. That's sorry, have I gone the wrong? Yeah, no, sorry, in procurement, that's down to 34,000, same as last year. So the staff are absorbing the cost increases there, Kerry.
My only question in relation to this one was those stock adjustments actually budgeting for the provision of stock write-offs. I just didn't quite understand that. Like, I know we've written things off before and there's a report that comes to council and we agree that'll hit us, but do we know that that's going to be 20,000, or have we just kind of guessed? And is that the best process for these?
Yeah, so councillor, yes, we have just basically determined a figure that we believe, acknowledging that previous years has been a bit higher than the $20,000, but that was mainly due to the fact that, we now had that formal process in place, and they were doing, that proper stock take and doing everything. So we've put roughly that 20 grand there as an indicative figure, because again, we don't know where it's going to land once they do their stock take. Who knows how many nuts, bolts and everything that's in the stores areas that might have,
Not been accounted for.
not be accounted for. So yes, that is just indicative at this stage.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Councillor Potter?
Yeah, just curious what it was, because there's no figure beside that, what last year's stock adjustment was, last financial year's.
Kerry, do you remember what the journal was at 30 June last year?
Yeah, so last year's ended up at being 42,000. And again, that was basically because last year was almost one of the first years that we had that process in place where a full stock take was done. They really, put some effort into doing that process.
So that was a really big clean-up
Yes.
year.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, good. Thank you. Happy to leave that at 20 and we'll see where that lands, Council, noting that clearly a lot of work's happened here to clean up those stores, so thank you. Okay, but again, just acknowledging our management there in purchasing procurement have held their budget, 34,000, including the 20 for stock write-offs. And moving on to internal plant for our purchasing department, this is where obviously they're travelling around the region, servicing all the different stores that we have. Budget for this current year is 65,000. They've spent 35, and they're suggesting they could bring that back to 56, which is a $9,000 decrease on this year's budget. Which is good to see. They've done well. Yeah. Does anyone want any questions about that? No. And consultants, we had 30,000 there for consultants last year, and that's been reduced to zero. Manager, just some narrative around that for council. Thank you.
Yes, so from memory, that 30,000 was originally put in there to do with the centralised procurement, and that's been just a little bit reassessed as to how and when that sort of plays out. So we've taken that out of there for now.
Thanks very much, Manager. So there's a $30,000 saving there by taking that consultancy out of the budget. Well done. Okay, so that pretty well wraps up our purchasing. Councillors, any final questions before we wrap up that section? Just going to have a quick look at what the next section would be fleet. How about we work through fleet? Can we work through fleet and then have morning tea after that, and we'll come back and deal with some of those other issues? So, Craig, if we can just get the fleet one up, that'd be great. Thanks. So this is just the operating costs to run our plant and fleet department, which of course is a very big department of council. So the first line is 135,000 for cost recoveries of small plant. So carriers understand that that's where different departments will buy small items of equipment, and that'll be bought through the fleet area. They'll purchase it and then basically cost it out to the department. So it's really funds in, funds out. Correct.
Yeah, so that first line there for the on-cost small plant recovery, so that actual line item there, while it does relate to the small plant, that's the on-cost percentage recovery from that. So when you look further down in our materials and services, you'll see where we've then got 135,000 for the purchase of it. So plant and fleet, it sort of nets out, and then each of the different areas have a small percentage based on what we predict that small plant purchases will be as part of the on-cost rate.
Then that 135,000 would be the small plant across the entire organisation pool.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Conversation starter, reducing that to 100,000 across the organisation as a starting point. Councillors, your thoughts? Councillor Potter?
Yeah, look, if this doesn't affect, and they can, as you said before, they can always come back if there's going to be a change in it, but changing it to 100 when they've only used 70 last financial year, so I can't see them using much more than 100 to the end of this financial year. I think it's quite okay.
General Manager Obey?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so this is a recovery on the wages. So there's a percentage of all the wages that are paid which goes back into this. So this is your revenue from the wages that are paid. So, it's not an actual expense where we're buying things. This is the revenue side that we're looking at here. So in our on-cost on wages, a component of that is recovered back to here.
Oh, sorry, I've misunderstood that. Yeah. So that being the case, would there be any scope to reduce the carrier? Would really stay at that? Is the 135 more reasonable?
So I guess if you did want to reduce, I would probably recommend that we look at the materials part down the bottom to make the decision on what that should be, because of the fact that our current on-cost rate will be recovering at the amount to get to close to that 135,000 by the time we hit the end of the year. So you're probably better off looking at the materials and services part to see what we've spent. It's also probably important to note that we do still have some areas purchasing small plant in their own, and we're trying to, I guess, bring that all back together. So that way it does then come under your plant and fleet to make sure that they're, specking out exactly what they need and purchasing, that, so that way it's, within council's policies. So that's just something to take into consideration when we look at that figure as well.
So just taking your advice there, Major, if we scroll through and Craig's highlighted that small equipment purchases line in materials that you're mentioning, so far it's just 13,751 after the end of February. So, any observations, thoughts, Councillor Shoemaker?
I remember this conversation last year very, very well. And we did talk about trying to funnel all small purchases through the one area. So I'd probably like to see, if possible, like that journal. And as we have the conversations with the departments, determine, why we're not using, I remember the staff fought for that 136,000 that we allocated, because I was pretty keen to take a pen to it. And I'm just be really keen to get the actual indicative costs of what we've spent across the operation, and then, why we're not doing that through plant and fleet, because I get that sometimes there might be things that break and we're on the run and it just makes sense to duck in and pick it up. But is that really giving best value? And then how are those assets tracked? And there's a whole lot of questions I have about small plant. So I'm fully supportive of just flagging that one for a bit of a review at the end, just to make sure whatever amount we actually set is indicative of what the business needs, and that there's that understanding across all departments that to buy small plant, there is a process and you'll need to go through plant and fleet to make that happen. That's my thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, your thoughts, Manager?
Yes, no, fully supportive of that idea. And I know we are working in this space at the moment to try and get, I guess, some more policy governance around all those portable and attractive type assets. So that way we, have a bit more of a policy around that. So that is in the pipeline.
Manager, that being the case, in light of this discussion, is it possible that we can again just put a flag on that one? So as each department's budget comes through, if they've got line items there for small equipment, can we make sure that's flagged for council so we can actually have a bit of a further dig into that and talk about can that be consolidated back into the plant and fleet?
Yes,
If
that's not a problem.
Council would like to go, thank you. Council's thought, I've done it again, the microphone, year to date here, but there could be a lot more that's out there, couldn't there, in the department? So do we want to just leave that one alone for the time being and see what comes back in coming weeks? Yeah?
Yep. So the way we've got it now if we went with the proposed one with 100,000, that's like null and void. You've got the in and the out. If we just, so if we left it at that and then just look.
So if we just leave the 135, and then as the departments come through with their small equipment budgets, we can roll all that up and see what that comes to. And council can have a much closer look at that, Kerry, as we work through. And then at the end, you can give us the consolidated report that says this is what all the departments have put forward.
Yep. No, that's fine.
Is that doable?
Yeah, that's all good.
Sounds good. Thank you. So, Craig, we'll just leave that as is with a flag on it to be reviewed department by department and then consolidated at the end. Thank you. Okay, righto, where are we at? So we're still in fleet. If we scroll down to general expenses, I think, without jumping too far ahead, once we get there, look, everything's fairly consistent, but the big one, of course, is fuel costs. So at the moment, we've got in the current year's budget, $1,080,000. That was based on what we thought the average fuel price probably was over 12 months ago. We've got 1.371 million in the budget, in the original budget, in the proposed budget at this stage, which was based on 857,000 litres at $1.60 per litre. It was probably a reasonable assumption when Kerry put this in some weeks ago, but council's had discussions about increasing that to an average price of $2 a litre to be realistic with where fuel prices are, which would make the budget 1.714 million. I'm just keen to hear thoughts around the room as to the price assumption on that, the average price. Councillor Shoemaker?
I just more had a question about hedging and how we actually purchase our fuel. Do we bid and purchase like based on a contract and hedge a price with a supplier, or do we just kind of go out in the open market and buy fuel?
I would probably have to take that on notice and just find out. I know we do buy in bulk. I'm just not sure the process as to how our procurement area actually, I guess, gets that, whether it's a contract and we bulk purchase or
Yeah.
have that pre-purchase of so many, containers or whatever, or whether there is some other process. So I can find out more information on that and send you through that detail.
Yeah, just with this one, I'm fully supportive of the budget increase. I think we have to be realistic here and make sure that, that's one item that we can't cut back on, which was the real reason why we did make that adjustment last year. We were trying to get a realistic figure around what fuel would actually be. And but I do think with this one, I'd really appreciate, like I know Lou does a lot of incredible work in that procurement space. If she was able to give us some insight about fuel and her predictions for the year ahead, I'd really value her advice, because I'm not an expert. I'm only paying at the Bowser, but I do know in my former role at the mine site, there was a lot of work in hedging, and it was quite interesting how they bid for fuel, and I think it'd just be good to understand from Lou's point of view what she's thinking is relevant with the industry at the moment. So that one, if that's okay, if we could flag that one and Lou could provide some insight. Kerry, welcome your thoughts.
Yes, no, that's not a problem. I'll get her to put some information together and send through.
Even if she could just dial into the workshop on Monday and give us a bit of an update, like in her words and thoughts, just really value her insights in that area.
Yeah, no, that's not a problem. I'll see what she's doing on Monday and see if that's possible.
Thanks, Manager. Councillor Hensham?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, look, as mentioned earlier through the week, and happy to take it on notice again, but fuel costs and our leaders there at be at $2, but also an interesting take on fuel. And the question as I asked through the week was how much, and could we get a report on what we use in AdBlue? Because I'm sure our modern day fleet is AdBlue, which is, even though it'd be fuel costs, it would be handy for us to see just a breakdown of, normal diesel costs, fuel costs, with the percentage of what the AdBlue, because, 6 weeks, 2 months ago, AdBlue was not procurable in the country. So that could have an effect at some stage. I mean, it's been bandied around to start our own company over in Western Australia, but that would just be an interesting addition to this budget review.
Yes.
So, Manager, if just in light of that, if we could have just some time allocated at Monday's workshop, we could get Lou to give us, Mr CEO, perhaps a briefing on where she sees fuel prices over the next 12 months, what our process is in terms of options for forward contracts, and whether we can give consideration to AdBlue, if you could perhaps take that and at least give us a brief overview. We know there's probably short notice, but if that's possible, that'd be great.
Certainly is, Mayor, and we certainly do use AdBlue. So but we'll arrange for that.
Thanks, Mr CEO. Thanks, Major. Council, do you want us to leave that at $2 at this stage, big flag, subject to what the staff advice is? Yep. So, Craig, if we put that to the 1714, you got that there? Thank you. Okay, we might just work through that on screen. Councillors, the blue column, have a look through that.
I had a question just in relation to, we've got a fleet maintenance budget and then a general maintenance budget, and the year-to-date figures are quite lenient. quite low, like spend in comparison to the budget. Just wanted to understand what the difference was between fleet and general maintenance, and because our general maintenance budget's much higher than our fleet budget. I would have thought it would be the other way around, but just interested about those two budgets.
Yes, thank you, councillor. So obviously the fleet maintenance obviously relates to bits and pieces to do with the actual fleet, and when they're doing all their servicing and their fixing, that's not sort of that part related. When we had a look down in that general maintenance, when we had a look back years prior, seeing as though we haven't spent that much this year, it was a little bit of like there was a lot of money spent in prior years in that area, but it was a little bit difficult on first glance to determine exactly what was in there. However, going forward and changes in strategy on, I guess, optimization of fleet, getting rid of some of those old plant items that were costing us quite a lot of money, have all contributed, I guess, helping save and allow that fleet and workshop to sort of sit within their budget how it is. So that is a space where we had talked about that, you know, potentially as long as we keep roughly some funds in there for the fabrication and workshop to do their general maintenance in, you know, to do actually within that space, that we could reduce down there.
So does the team, because I certainly recognise the incredible work the team have done in fleet and the optimisation process and review, based on what they know, like just the maturity in terms of the documents we've seen and the actual, you know, value for the life of the asset and these sorts of things that we're starting to talk about, which is really exciting. Do they have a recommendation based on what they know about our fleet and its condition now in terms of what reasonable budgets would be to set for those areas?
Yes, so we had sat down with the fleet scheduler in this space, and he was pretty confident that, you know, if we did in that general maintenance area and with the other bits and pieces, you know, of what we've put together for next year's budget, that he could work within those means and, you know, they would be able to do what needed to be done.
Is that the 65 for fleet maintenance and then 110 for general maintenance, or is that open to negotiation?
So I think they were pretty, they would like that 65,000 in the fleet maintenance to stay, but they were happy that we could reduce roughly that 90,000 from that general maintenance down the bottom, and that would still give them enough funds to do what they needed to for that general maintenance and that to keep the workshop running.
So we'll take that 110 down to 20. Yeah.
Yes.
Fabulous. And then see how things are tracking in that area. Yeah, really exciting. Thank you.
Thank you, Manager. Internal plan charges, Manager, there we've got 231,000, same as last year in the budget. I just noticed year to date, over the 8 months, that tracks at about 16,000 a month. If one was to extrapolate that over the year, it brings it out to 192,000. And if we were to adopt that budget, it would save 39,000. Anything there that we need to be aware of? Would that 16 a month maybe not necessarily be indicative?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think so. 16,000 per month was most likely. Well, it was based on those new plant and fleet rates that we did some work on and working out what the unit rates were supposed to be. So I guess it will just depend on whether any of those rates need to be adjusted based on the fact that we do have those increases in fuel and those sorts of things going into next year. But there is potentially some amount in there that you could decrease that slightly by if you'd like.
Thoughts on that, councillors?
So the proposed, the mayor's proposal was 192,000. So is that achievable?
I think even if you were to potentially put it to that 200,000 to give a little bit of scope for if they did need to add in some increases based on the increases in fuel prices, I think that would, yeah.
Councillor, happy with that advice? Yeah, 200,000 there. Councillor, anything further in fleet before we break for morning tea? Okay, I'll now move that we adjourn the meeting for morning tea and resume in 15 minutes' time. Seconder, Councillor Hitchin. Those in favour, carried unanimously. Thanks all. Okay, welcome back everyone. I now move that we reopen the meeting. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Hitchin. Those in favour, carried unanimously. Okay. So I'm just going to get the agenda back up on the screen, Council. So just a couple of preliminary comments. First of all, we've dealt with the general operations, materials and services sections of our budgets for ICT, business systems, corporate services and fleet. In doing so, I just want to make a couple of things very clear while this is being live streamed to the community. Can I make it very clear that number one, this council has had to deal with some significant challenges in terms of cost rises. We've had a revaluation since we took up office as a newly elected council in 2020 in relation to buildings and roads, which has added an extra, a few $1 million in extra cost that council has to absorb in its budget. It's nothing we can do about it. That's a regulatory process that we must comply with. In addition to that, for the community, council's worked hard as a group of councillors to find savings to address that in order to mitigate rates rises. Now, I'd like to remind the community that in year one, and if the media are listening, I'd like you to report on this if you could, please. I'd be very grateful. In year one of our term, we delivered a 0% rate rise in the COVID year to all ratepayers on the general rates across the region. We mitigated the rates and charges increases that applied to our services across water, wastewater and other services. We, in year two, delivered a 0% general rate rise for all farmers, primary producers across the region. And we capped the non-primary producers' general rate rise to 1%. We again mitigated the fee increases to many of the services we provide across the region. And we've done that by reducing many of our overheads costs, and we've done that without, as some councils have had to do, we have avoided going after those services that council provides to the community. We've done that in collaboration with our CEO and our staff, and the organisation has worked collectively, all 300 plus of us, to try to deliver that for the community. Now, let me say this. There has not been a pay rise delivered to any councillor in this room this last year, and we have not budgeted for a pay rise this next year. That'll be 2 years where a councillor doesn't take a pay rise. No councillor has been claiming any fuel allowance this financial year for their travel. Everyone's doing their own travel, thousands of kilometres across the region and outside the region, using their own vehicles and paying for their own fuel. As I said before, we don't have lavish morning teas or lunches, and when we do have, often we have to go to events that we're required to go to as councillors, and we pay for our own tickets and we pay for our own meals. Now, I'm starting to lose tolerance with people who are starting to suggest that councillors are taking pay rises and making profiteering at the expense of the community. That is not happening, and it's completely false and is misrepresenting the facts. I don't know another council in Queensland where the councillors pay for all of their own fuel and travel and meals and accommodation, well, not accommodation always, but certainly meals and travel out of their own pockets. If you can find one, please let me know, because I can't. So this council, the councillors in this room, all 7 of us are doing the heavy lifting. We are setting the example for our staff, and they're responding accordingly with a lot of heavy lifting. This morning has been an example of that, and I'd like to applaud our managers and general managers who've come to the table here today, Carolyn, Anthony, you and Kerry, and have worked with us to reduce your budget significantly for what is going to be the 3rd year in a row, to deliver savings to the community so that we can mitigate rate rises. Now, you can't go on, we can't do that forever, but You know, we are really tightening our belt where we can. And if there's a council that's doing a better job, there may well be. I'd please like to know what their strategies are. But as you could see this morning, we have not left one stone unturned. We question every single line at a workshop and at a meeting, and we put a lot of time and effort into this. It's a very, very scientific process where we look at every single item in the budget. And so I just want to clarify that, and I hope that we start seeing some more positive commentary around this into the future that tells the facts about the efforts that are being made by everyone inside this organisation. So thanks for listening to that. That's my views, and I'd appreciate any other councillors' views before we move on that. But I'd just like to say thanks to everybody. Everyone's doing a tremendous job in pulling together through this process. Now, moving forward, Mr. CEO, we've got some matters to deal with still on the agenda. Have we got a proposed motion that we can put forward?
Button on. We have, Mayor. So if we're going to have, we're able under the regulations to move into closed session on budget matters. So whilst we're displaying the screens with the printouts, the minutes won't show, but the resolution or the recommendation is basically 6.3 draft 22-23 budget. That this matter is considered confidential under section 254J3C, the local government budget, for agenda item 6.2 and 6.3. And it would be just to move into closed session, please, Mayor, to allow discussion.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. So, Council, I'd like to now move that, as described by Mr. CEO, we move into closed session on, in accordance with section 254J3C to consider Council's local budget. Do we have a seconder? Yes, Councillor Potter, thank you. Those in favour? Carry unanimously. Thank you all. Okay, welcome back into our open committee meeting. We still have items 6.2 and 6.3 to deal with. 6.2, Mr. CEO, do we have a recommended motion in relation to that? Thank you.
We do, Mayor. As I said, we just don't have it up on the screen today. But the recommendation reads that the committee received the proposed 22-23 draft budget for the Finance, Corporate ICT departments and provides guidance for inclusion in the continued preparation of the full South Burnett Regional Council 22-23 annual budget as amended. Oh, do we need it read out again, Mayor? Or, oh, we got it on screen. Okay, Bree. Thank you. Thanks, Pete. Yeah, so as amended is the first one. And that'll be for the materials and components section of which we talk, and then we'll do the salaries as a separate resolution. Oh, happy as is, Mayor, and then we'll just do a separate one on that.
Do we have a mover for such? Thanks, Councillor Potter. Seconder, Councillor Henson. Speakers? Those in favour? Carry unanimously. Thank you all.
Okay, so effectively, now I haven't written it out longhand, but we'd be looking at what would we say, Mayor? That a report be brought back to the Budget Standing Committee. Yeah, we'll just get something on the table first. Back to the Budget Standing Committee. So that would be that a report be brought back to the Budget Standing Committee to detail the potential savings as discussed. In the salary component of the departmental budget. Salaries, sorry. The departmental budget. Budget.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Okay, anything further, councillors, in relation to that?
I'm just wondering if we should put in, similar to what we've discussed, something about the budget parameters, that we actually have a similar discussion with every general manager about every budget. I'm not sure, but I'm thinking
Yes.
this isn't in isolation, like this is across
Yes.
our entire budget. So whether there's certainly an expectation for this team, but in my view, there's an expectation for every team. We're wanting to have that deeper look at every team's budget. So in terms of resources,
And so, Bree, could we perhaps, just in light, if I could propose something, and that this process be extended to all departments in this current budget deliberation cycle. We happy with that? Does that sort of hit the mark? Comfortable? Yep. Okay. Yep. Everyone reasonably comfortable with that, committee? Okay, we'll seek a mover for that. Motion, Councillor Shoemaker, seconded Councillor Potter. Speakers, those in
Mayor,
Mr. CEO.
The only question is, in safe doing two resolutions then, given we've got finance, corporate and ICT and the same conversations be had with fleet, do we pop fleet up there as well? So finance, corporate, Bree, where we've got finance, corporate and ICT, fleet. Departmental budgets, department budgets. Yep, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Okay, those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. We'll get that locked in. Thanks, Bree. We'll move to 6.3 now, and that's the draft budget for plant and fleet. We have the recommendation there. We might just put there, Bree, if we could, thanks, the words at the end, as amended. Full stop. Nothing further to add there, Mr. CEO? Okay, if we're comfortable with that, committee, we'll seek a mover. Councillor Potter, seconded Councillor Henson. Speakers, those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. Thank you, committee, for what's been a very... fleet workshop. Sorry, yes, one more.
Yes. Yep.
Yes.
Yes,
One more.
please.
Thanks, Bree, yes. Over to you. Thanks, Mr. CEO. If you could give us some
I
guidance
was
there.
just going to keep it nice and simple for the minutes, Mayor, that a workshop be held with councillors in regard to White Fleet. Utilisation. We would be, I was going to put in there as soon as possible, but maybe, yeah, we'll do it as soon as possible. White Fleet utilisation as part of the current budget cycle. For this current, as part of the current budget cycle. And if people can improve it, please go.
Just have to, pop a space in there. Bree, while Bree's doing that, any additions to that, councillors, changes? Comfortable that covers, I'm sure you can articulate to General Manager the expectations of council. Councillor Shoemaker?
Just with that, councillors and the set or senior leadership team probably would like all general managers to participate in that conversation. Mark, what are your views?
Yeah, if we can get them here, we will. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's important because they'll know their business better. Yeah, yeah.
Perhaps then, Bree, if we could just add there, be held with councillors and, are we still the senior executive team? Have we moved to senior leadership team yet? Okay. So senior executive team, just to clarify that. Thanks, Bree. Okay. Do we have a mover? Councillor Potter, seconded Councillor Henson. Speakers? Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. Committee, that brings the agenda for today to the meeting to a close. Thank you for what's been a very productive discussion, and have a great rest of day. Call the meeting closed. Thank you.